Danny, a lanky 17-year-old boy with a rebellious streak, scoffed at the stories. To him, they were just tales spun by old-timers to keep kids from wandering too far. One late autumn evening, Danny decided to test the legend. His part-time job at the diner had kept him late, and the prospect of taking the long way home didn't appeal to him. Miller's Creek Road was a shortcut. The forest swallowed the last rays of sunlight as Danny pedaled his bike onto the forbidden road. The air grew colder, and an unnatural stillness blanketed the woods. His tires crunched over dead leaves, the sound unnervingly loud in the silence. A shiver crept down his spine, but Danny shook it off. "It's just a road," he muttered under his breath. As he rode deeper, the trees seemed to close in, their twisted branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The faint sound of music drifted through the air, a haunting melody that made Danny stop. He scanned the darkness, his heart pounding. "Hello?" he called out, his voice trembling slightly. There was no reply, just the wind rustling the leaves. But then he heard it again, soft, distant laughter, like children playing a cruel game of hide-and-seek. "Who's there?" Danny demanded, gripping the handlebars tightly. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, a little girl in a tattered white dress. Her hair was matted, and her face was pale as the moonlight. She stood motionless in the middle of the road, her dark eyes locked onto his. Danny's breath caught in his throat. "Hey, are you okay?" he asked, his voice cracking. The girl didn't respond. Instead, she raised her hand and pointed to the woods. Danny's gaze followed her gesture, but he saw nothing except darkness. When he turned back, the girl was gone. His instincts screamed at him to turn around, but pride pushed him forward. "It's just my imagination," he whispered, trying to convince himself. The road stretched endlessly before him, the forest now alive with faint whispers. Danny pedaled faster, his legs burning with effort. Out of the corner of his eye, he caught glimpses of movement, shadows darting between the trees. Then his bike jerked to a sudden stop, as if an invisible hand had grabbed it. Danny was thrown to the ground, landing hard on his side. Groaning, he looked up and froze. Standing in a circle around him were 5 figures, all children, their faces pale and expressionless. Their clothes were outdated, torn, and dirty, as though they'd been lost in time. The girl from before was among them, her hollow eyes fixed on Danny. "Stay away!" he shouted, scrambling to his feet. The children began to hum the same haunting melody he'd heard earlier. Their voices grew louder, harmonizing in an unsettling chorus. Danny backed away, but the circle tightened. "What do you want?" he yelled, his voice cracking with fear. The little girl stepped forward, her head tilting unnaturally to the side. Her lips parted, and in a voice far too deep for her small frame, she said, "Stay with us." Danny turned and ran, abandoning his bike. The forest seemed to warp around him, the trees twisting into grotesque shapes. The whispers became screams, echoing in his ears. He tripped over a root and fell, scraping his palms on the rough ground. When he looked up, he was back on the road. Relief washed over him, but it was short-lived. Ahead, the children stood in a line, their eyes glowing faintly in the dark. "You can't leave," they chanted in unison. Danny spun around, but the road behind him had vanished, replaced by a wall of trees. Panic gripped him as he searched for a way out. The children began to move closer, their feet not touching the ground. Desperation took over. Danny grabbed a large branch and swung it wildly. "Stay back!" he screamed. The children stopped, their expressions blank. Then, one by one, they began to smile, wide, unnatural grins that stretched far beyond what should have been possible. Danny's scream echoed through the forest as the children lunged. The last thing he saw was their ghostly faces closing in. The next morning, Danny's bike was found lying in the middle of Miller's Creek Road, its tires still spinning. The townsfolk whispered about his disappearance, adding his name to the growing list of those who had vanished on that cursed path. And on quiet nights, when the wind is just right, the haunting melody of children's laughter can still be heard, echoing through the trees, calling out to the next unfortunate soul.